every breath I take all of my days. I will glorify your name.
Parents, welcome to another episode of The Journey, a podcast intended to educate, equip, and entertain you as we talk about important issues facing our families. PCA is a Christ-centered, biblically based, and family-focused community of committed believers doing life together. We hope the information you hear on this podcast informs and inspires you to be a better parent. Welcome to The Journey.
All right, parents, welcome back to The Journey. We are up at the North Campus, and we got a kind of a special summer little thing kind of going on here. I just got done with doing a book, and now I've got some parents who've watched a movie. You guys got the easy part, right? You didn't have to read a book. You got to watch a movie. Super exciting about that. But I want to, for the parents who don't know who everybody is here, let's introduce ourselves. Jane, tell us kind of just who you are, your kids at PCA, a little bit about yourself.
Yes, my name is Jane Matthews. I've been a PCA North parent for, 8 years now. My oldest is a rising 6th grader, Jericho. I've got 2 girls, rising 2nd and 4th graders, Jada and Julia. We are not, my husband's a Texas native, but I am not, but we got here as soon as we could, right? Whatever that phrase is. And we are so happy to be a PCA family.
Yeah, you're kind of like the northwest part of the country, right?
Yes. I come from all over the West, but have landed here at least for this decade.
Yeah.
So,
and we're thrilled to have you.
Thank you for having me.
Yes.
I work out of the home too. I am an attorney, but I primarily identify as the PCA mom of my 3 kids. So here we go.
I love it.
It's awesome.
All right, Gabe.
I'm Gabe Boyd. I have 4 girls here at PCA North. We started actually way back in the day at PCA in Plano, and then moved up here and transferred our kids up here. So I have a soon-to-be junior, a soon-to-be 8th grader, soon-to-be 6th grader, and soon-to-be 3rd grader.
Yeah. Keeping all those in order is like, that's the thing.
I mean, that was relatively quick recall for me.
Totally.
It's normally not that fast.
You've got a driver now.
I do have a driver.
Right? That's
a huge help.
That's a huge help.
Yeah,
right?
I love that.
And does she work too?
She babysits.
Okay.
So when she wants to.
Yeah.
It's flexible.
That's right.
It's flexible.
When she needs money, she babysits.
Yep. I love it. Julie.
Yes, I am Julie Hildebrand. We have had already 1 student graduate from PCA in Plano, and then our next child is going to be a senior, and then our youngest is going to be a sophomore. So we're kind of on the other end of the people at this table,
Well, I'm a little further than you are. So not that anybody would know, right? But yeah, for those who don't know me, Dan Panetti, Tricia and I have 4 kids. And 3 have already graduated from PCA. So 1's still in college, and then Campbell, like your Cruz, is going to be a senior. Mm-hmm. So we get to go through that senior year thing together.
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah.
I think they've got some fun plans.
It's awesome. Okay, so since this is a summer podcast, I just have a real quick summer question.
Okay.
Favorite summer treat snack? What's your go-to, your family thing? What do you like?
So my husband is a big Brahms ice cream fan, but recently a Cold Stone Creamery just opened up by our house. So
dangerous.
Dangerous. Although it is 3 times more expensive, I would say it is 3 times more delicious. So it is worth it to me.
Very good.
In my house it's popsicles.
Popsicles.
Right now my kids are on a bomb pop.
Old school.
And so it's very weird. I have to regulate their intake of popsicles at this point. My oldest, just the other day, she polished off 6 or 7 bomb pops, I think in a row.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh gosh,
that's impressive. That's impressive.
This is getting out of hand. So we're gonna have to put a governor on the bomb pop intake at some point.
Nice.
But yeah, popsicles are a big deal.
Julie?
I'm going to bring some sophistication to the conversation.
Okay.
I have figured out for this summer what I really like is I like to chill my glass for my Topo Chico.
Oh.
And I like to pull it out of the freezer and pour it and hold the cold glass and drink the cold. So yes, that I've just figured that out.
Yeah.
So I have an answer for this summer treat.
There you go. I don't like water with bubbles, so I'm not a Topo Chico guy. Mine's watermelon.
Oh,
Yes.
Yeah.
I just
That's a
right when
good
summer
life
rolls
choice.
around and you see the watermelons there, and I mean, I just love. It takes me back to my childhood. So ate a lot of watermelon as a kid growing up. So
Awesome.
anyway, lots of fun. Okay, so here's the deal. Our assignment was to watch both Inside Out movies, right? Pixar made these two movies. We just talked about the first one, probably came out about 4 or 5 years ago. And the second one just came out. Now, here's the deal. For our parents, we just need you to know these, if you haven't seen them, we're going to ruin them for you because we're going to talk all about them. These aren't going to be like, we're leaving anything out. But we're going to save the second movie, right, Inside Out 2, for the second podcast. So we're going to talk about the first movie first, kind of as a setup, right? Mm-hmm. And what did we learn from it? What did we like, not like about it? What should parents know about it? Because we want to lead into the second one, because the second one really introduces a whole different phase of childhood, although the first one kind of hints at it. And I thought that was kind of interesting. As I went back and watched the first one, I was like, oh. And then we also want to kind of talk about, we think that there might be a third one because it seems like Pixar and Disney are leading somewhere with this, and we want to kind of like prepare ourselves for that. So let's talk about Inside Out, the first movie. It's about emotions. Right. Okay, it's about a young girl named Riley who's 11 at the time, right? The first movie comes out. She's 11 years old. She's growing up in Minnesota, right? Her family moves to California.
San Francisco.
San Francisco. The Golden Gate Bridge is not golden, which I thought was one of the cutest lines. But it's about these emotions, right, as a young person growing up and learning, I guess it's from the perspective of the emotions. It's not really Riley's perspective of her emotions, it's her emotions perspective of Riley. Mm-hmm. So let me just ask you from the very beginning, what were your thoughts about the movie when you watched it for the first time? So go back, not the more recent time. When you watched it the first time, what did you think about the movie? Who did you take? Did you take your kids at that particular time? What was your assessment of it? And let's just start with Inside Out, the first movie. Thoughts?
Yeah, well, I don't remember, the very first time I saw the Inside Out movie, so I can't give you my first impressions, but I can give you my more recent impressions on what that movie was. It had been a minute since I had seen that, and so I forgot so many of the elements. So the emotions that are kind of in control of Riley, mm-hmm. for lack of a better word, they have a switchboard and they're controlling Riley, and it's joy and fear and anger and disgust and sadness.
Yes. And
this movie starts out, and you see Riley as a newborn baby. Yep. And so this is this very sweet thing mm-hmm. for me. The first emotion she experiences is tied to the first time she sees her parents. And that's where she just has this simple moment of joy. Yep. And that's all it is for her.
And I love how you said the emotions control her, because there's actually a control board.
Right.
And I think that's one of the interesting things, right? When she's born, there's a control board and there's one button. Mm-hmm. Okay. And joy presses the button, and then later sadness will press the button, right? And then the control board grows. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of the whole thing. The theme as it goes through is the growing of the control board. But it does seem like emotions, from the way that the movie's put together, and I don't know if Pixar wants you to understand this, but emotions, in a sense, control you, right? And I think that's one of my biggest takeaways is, from a biblical perspective, we're supposed to be controlling of our emotions, right? We have emotions, but we should be controlling our emotions, right? Not our emotions controlling us. And so kind of an interesting little play on
yes,
that,
indeed.
Right? The control board is, right, when anger hits it, you have to be angry. When sadness hits it, you have to be sad. When joy hits it, you have to be joyful, right? So it's kind of an interesting play on that.
Yes, right. I think the lead, if you're going to pick a lead character here, it is that joy character.
Yes.
And her primary purpose in her life, in her role, in Riley's mind, is to make sure Riley always experiences happiness, mm-hmm. that most of her emotions are happy, or most of her memories are happy, and they're not tainted by some of the others. And so Joy's just this very kind of one-dimensional, one goal character. And while she recognizes from time to time, there's a place for disgust, because that's how we know not to get poisoned, and there's a place for fear, and there's a place for anger, the movie starts out and she's like, I don't even know what to do with sadness. Sadness is just this thing that she can't comprehend, but we can't send her off anywhere. Yeah, right. So here we are, and joy just kind of controls the show for the most part. Yep. And maybe that's a good reflection of childhood, is that most children maybe are just inclined to be happier at that stage of life than feel a lot of those other emotions.
And I when the first Inside Out came out several years ago, my children were younger, and mm-hmm. I took them to see the movie there. And I would agree with what Jane said. It was almost as if from the beginning, Joy was the hero of the story and the one everybody's rooting for to always take over.
Yep.
And then you find yourself rooting for Joy all the time in a good way, but then you realize that other emotions do play important roles. And so it was fun at that time to take our kids at the ages they were to see that and see that, we do want to cheer for Joy and root for Joy, but other emotions come in and do us a great service.
Yep.
And it's not joy at all costs. It's sometimes you have to have sacrifice and let those other emotions come in order to get bigger joy, greater joy.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to think back of the first time I saw the movie, and I think there were so many different layers to it that there was a lot to comprehend in there, and a lot that kids obviously aren't going to. But even from the standpoint of all these emotions triggering reactions within Riley's life, but then those culminate into these memories, right? And so they have these little balls of memory that are now held within Riley's mind, and they're all affixed to a certain emotion. What we find out is that those memories can actually be changed as she perceives those different memories. Sometimes a joyful memory can also turn into a sad or an angry memory. But I think my biggest thing, just in terms of the actual emotions themselves, was the fact that they named one Joy. Mm-hmm. And then you even said it, like a lot of it was tied to happiness. Mm-hmm. And just biblically, I'm like kind of trying to figure out, like, what are we doing here? Those are different things. Mm-hmm. And so the fact that Pixar named one Joy, it was I wouldn't say it was complex for me. Mm-hmm. because I don't think that joy is an emotion. It'd be better if they'd have named it happiness.
Yeah, because we've always heard happiness depends on your circumstances, right? And joy is sort of a deep-rooted emotion that, regardless of your circumstances, you can experience joy.
That's right.
So, in a sense, from a biblical perspective, we would agree they probably misnamed that emotion. It probably should have been named happiness, because it seems like her emotion was based on what was going on around her.
Very circumstantial.
That's right.
Very circumstantial, which was fine, right? But it's like if she were named happiness, it probably would have been better to kind of fit what she was trying to do. She's trying to make Riley happy.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Right? So if it's a good day, Riley's happy. If it's a bad day, then Riley's sad. See the emotions and we go there? Mm-hmm. But joy can be a constant theme throughout. So regardless of the day and regardless of what happens and regardless if you make the team, can you still have joy? And the answer is yes. Mm-hmm. But does that mean you have to be happy about it? No.
Yeah.
Right? So totally.
And
it
joy
was very complex.
It kind of starts to blossom into that towards the end of the movie, right? When she starts to discover that, well, there's got to be moments of sadness that actually increase now, not just not happiness, but joy, right? Mm-hmm. So there's almost like this growth throughout the movie
a little bit,
within that own emotion.
Because in the you start to see in the first movie that very quickly, while you're rooting for Joy, you start to see she's an absolute control freak.
Yeah.
and everything becomes at the goal of Joy. Even super manipulation, even looking at things not as they are, but as you wish they would be, and layering it with, it's okay, it's fine, it's and just be happy, just be happy, just be happy, and you realize that she's actually, like I said, a control freak, and I think the audience goes along with that and starts to see, maybe themselves in that, like, what am I trying to control? In every single situation, just to get the happy or joyful, outcome, or to keep my kids, quote unquote, happy. And where am I not letting natural consequences happen, or where am I not, but I real early in that first one, she becomes the control freak.
Yep. Yeah, very true.
I was wondering in that, to your point, earlier that you said something about Joy being the main character, and I just wondered, I wonder what would happen if they made a movie where Joy was not the primary emotion.
Yeah.
Because it's interesting as you start, like, I love it when they go into like the mom's emotions and the dad's emotions.
Yes.
And it seems like the emotion that is sitting at the center of the control board and theirs is a different color. Like sadness, I think, is the kind of the main emotion within the mom's person. I was just wondering, like, I don't know if it's like an assumption that Pixar's making, like it would be more fun to make a kid whose primary emotion and drive is derived from joy. I wonder what it'd be like if they made one that was derived from a different circumstance.
Yeah. Fear.
Different, yeah.
Disgust.
Well, wait and see, because I think that might be what we're talking about. Yeah.
Well, okay, so a couple things, and we can talk about everything, right? One thing that stood out to me was the focus of this movie is on Riley, the girl, but she does have parents. Okay, so she's a single child, only child. She has a mom and a dad. It's kind of interesting because there's not a lot of really focus on the parents and parenting.
Sure.
That's one of the things that it's like the parents are there and they're kind of like fun and they're around, but they definitely don't do any parenting. And I kind of, like, ooh, the dad puts the foot down once, right, and disciplines his daughter, right? But I thought it was a very interesting concept that if you're going to introduce the parents, that there's not a lot that we get from like what good parenting looks like.
Sure.
And that was kind of a couple little things, right? Where the mom kind of has, a fantasy about another man that, she wished she had married, right? The dad, even though the dad seems to be pretty engaged as a dad, they kind of make him that, stereotypical dad where he's more interested in sports and he's kind of tuned out, right? As the mom's giving him signals like, pick up on this or whatever, the dad seems like he's kind of out of it. But there's not a lot of parenting, focus on this. It's really more about Riley. But I mean, just from a parent perspective watching it, I wasn't super pleased with the parenting part that they put in there, but I also, it's Disney, right? It's Pixar. It's not going to be a great parenting movie. What did you guys think about just Riley's parents?
Yeah, sure. So with this Inside Out 1, I thought this was a good movie to watch with kids for some of these subtle lessons in parenting. And one of which was maybe what not to do. So you see a few times that the parents have very clearly labeled Riley. Riley is my happy girl.
Yep.
And they say that over and over again. And maybe initially it was something that they created in their family to encourage her and to, give her this sense of identity or something like that. But over time, and especially as she's going through these sad emotions with moving, that label is almost like an unfair expectation that they've put on her to not feel the other complicated emotions that she could be feeling. And so, as a parent, that's a lesson. Like, what we speak into our kids can positively impact them, or it can maybe feel like chains, like it can feel like it's imprisoning them a little bit. And so that was something that stuck out to me was this reminder, like, be careful with our words as parents and what we put on our kids in describing them, because they're going to feel like they're disappointing you if they're not that happy girl, or they're going to feel like they can't share their true emotions with you if it is inconsistent with this label that you've given them.
And that actually happens in the first movie. So Riley becomes very sad because she's left her friends and her family and all the different things, not her family, but she's left her friends and all the different experiences in Minnesota. She's in California. It is kind of interesting because something I think, and this was, I remember the first time I saw, Inside Out, as joy and sadness are outside the control room, and so there's no joy in there, right? The control board begins to shut down. And so Riley ends up deciding to run away from home, to go back to her, happy experiences of before. And it's very interesting because that control board, right, just hardens up, becomes black, goes away. And I was like, oh my God, are they talking about depression? Right? So one of the things that was interesting is they introduced the word stress in the first movie, okay? But they didn't introduce the word anxiety. right? Which will be interesting because the second movie is all about anxiety.
Right.
And so, like, the difference between stress and anxiety, right? Steve Lytle, who's one of our parents, did a podcast with me and said, listen, the difference between stress and anxiety is stress has a stressor, right? So Riley just moved. Right, that's a stressor. Right, new place, new home, terrible bedroom. Right,
Yeah.
All right, all their stuff hasn't gotten there yet. New friends, new school, all those different things. Right, that's a stress. Okay, anxiety doesn't have to have a reason. And so you'll watch in the second movie, right, as anxiety is introduced. It's a very interesting thing how, in a sense, you kind of create those emotions, you create those thoughts, you create those things. It doesn't actually have to have a situation. But the thing about stress is when the stressor is removed, right, then the stress is relieved. And he'll say, a lot of men, when we go in for counseling, men will talk about stress in their lives, where women will talk about anxiety, right? But in a sense, we kind of mean the same thing. We kind of mean those situations in life that are pressing down on us, right? But men aren't necessarily as tapped into our emotions as we are tapped into the environment, right? Something at work is happening, something in the family is happening, right? A financial stress, okay? So I thought it was very interesting that they introduced stress, but they didn't introduce anxiety. But then they almost took it to the point where they almost introduced the idea of depression, right? Where the whole emotional board like would shut down. So what did you guys think about that? Because that was like pretty deep.
I don't know if I got there. Okay. Dan, like, if I'm completely honest, I wouldn't have, until you started saying that, I was like, oh, yeah, probably so.
Okay.
I think I was probably just invested in the fact that Joy was not in control anymore.
Yeah.
And so the other emotions were doing their best to reestablish the identity that essentially the parents had given.
Yeah.
And so, but yeah, I think you're probably right. In terms of that depression, trying to return back to a time when things were better, and doing that in a way that was uncharacteristic of who this little girl actually was. Yep. I mean, in her normal right frame of mind, she would have never run away from home. Yeah. She would have had no reason to. Yeah. Right.
I kind of wish they didn't. This is just me speaking. I wish they didn't introduce the whole idea of running away as an 11-year-old girl in California. Like in today's culture, putting that kind of idea in a kid's mind, like, running away from home, I'm like, oh, that's it's like a girl getting on a bus, leaving her family. I'm like, please don't do that. But they did, and that's it's sad and disappointing. But in today's culture, like that could have turned into so much worse.
Sure.
But it didn't. So we got her back home eventually. What else though from anything else jump out to you from the movie that you just thought, wow, that was interesting that they introduced that, or I can't believe they took that particular twist on it?
I think one of the things that I'd love to talk about are the islands.
Okay.
Like, I thought those were really interesting. And I don't remember all of them. I know she had like a goofball island and a friend and a family.
Yep.
Honesty was
And so I thought those were interesting ways. And I don't know that I really comprehended them the first time I watched the movie.
Okay, I'll say I thought it was very interesting. The islands are attached to her memories.
Right.
Okay, so as the core memories come in, the core memories will produce an island, right? And that's kind of like her 5 main things or whatever it is that identify. And then in the second movie, right, we're going to get those again, and it's going to be a very interesting thing of what's going to happen to those particular islands. But I did think it was interesting how, from a biblical standpoint, there aren't principles that produce the islands. They're emotions and experiences, right? And just understand, it's Pixar, right? They're not going to come in and say, your island is family because God's designed family, right? This movie would not have that, right? But that's really what that island represents. Yeah. For her, it's because of these memories that she has. And her islands, the core identities that she has, right, are because of memories and experiences, right? And I just thought, I get where they're going with that, right? From a Christian perspective, right? I don't agree that my main identities of who I am are based on the experiences that I've had, right? I think, the Scripture teaches us that God's designed us, right? Put us in a family and given us, in a sense, gifts, abilities, talents, identity of who we are. And so I would think that our islands can be principles based on truth, not just emotion. But I liked them. I thought they were very interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting to see, too, how maybe fragile these islands are. Like, in the absence of joy, in the absence of happiness, you literally see these islands crumble, right? Yep. Oh, Well, there goes honesty, and there goes Goofball Island, and now family's starting to crumble just in the absence of happiness in contrast to joy.
And honestly,
right?
if they're built by emotions, right, then they're torn down by emotions, and those change so quickly. So in a sense, it kind of fits, right? If they're built by principle, then they have to be torn down by principle, and they would be much stronger. But
Well, and that I think is it right there.
Yeah.
When it's an island that's built based on what's in her own mind, then when things go a little off,
Yep.
those will be torn down. And so I think we very quickly get into and see the importance of being rooted
Yeah.
in the Word and being rooted in what God's design is, because we see how quickly it crumbles when it's left to us, when it's left to our emotions. And I think in the first movie, the big important structure was the core memory.
yeah.
It was the core memory was so important, and she's got to have great memories. We can't let sadness even brush by and touch them. They'll turn blue, and then she'll have sad memories. And, I lay that foundation because I thought that the overarching, important thing in the second one was such a change.
Yep.
Was such a change. So, you watch the first one, it's core memory. That's where everything that's what we are going to go to the mat for, is her core memories. And where that goes in the second one is so interesting.
It is.
Yeah.
All right, so nobody's mentioned Bing Bong yet in the first one, and I'll say, okay, they introduced this character of an imaginary friend, which I thought was interesting because, right, there's now a movie out called Imaginary Friends, right, and it's which apparently I have not seen, but I've had some friends who go see it, and they're like, okay, here's the deal: Imaginary Friends, the movie, is not funny. It's actually a very profound, deep dive into why people have imaginary friends, and it's usually because something has traumatically happened in their life. And I'm like, really? Because I didn't get that from the trailer at all. Mm-hmm. So I'll just say this, right? Be careful of watching trailers before you go see movies, okay? Because, right, they look funny and it's all entertaining, right? But there's something different behind it. So anyway, but she has an imaginary friend named Bing Bong, and I thought it was one of the most interesting things of the movie because Bing Bong sacrifices himself,
Yes.
right, so that Joy can get back to the control board. And I was just, okay, here's the deal. Okay, I'll admit it. I'm a crier.
Did. I knew it.
I'm
I
a
knew
crier.
it. I
Okay?
knew it. I was
and
gonna say.
my kids will always laugh at, I'll cry in just the funniest situations of literally we're watching a movie, right? Inside, and Dad's over here crying, right? And when Bing Bong sacrificed himself so that Joy could be propelled to get back, right? I was crying. I was like, that is such a great picture, right? Of what a true friend looks like, right? Of sacrificing yourself. Anybody else? Bing Bong?
I think Bing Bong is actually a good, deep character,
Yeah.
too, right? So Bing Bong lives in imagination land, which we see in Inside Out 2, right? Another
Yep.
thing that's just kind of changed with age. But Bing Bong, I think, is the character that comes in that reveals some interesting things about Joy. So there's this moment in the movie where Bing Bong comes to this realization that the dream that Bing Bong and Riley had was to take this rocket ship up to the moon,
Yep.
right? This was the thing that they were going to do. And in understanding that's not going to happen anymore, I'm sad about this. I'm just upset. I don't know what to do. Joy's like, what's happening here? We got to go. We got to stay on task. We got to go and make Riley happy. And sadness sits with Bing Bong and helps Bing Bong get through that loss and listens and comforts and here's this. Now we can see sadness's purpose that Joy could not identify in the beginning of the movie, but now we're seeing, okay, there are these layers of sadness, and sadness is what ultimately helps Bing Bong get back up so that Bing Bong can then sacrifice himself, right, to kind of save the day and get Joy back to the switchboard. But it was only through sadness, not through joy, not through happiness, that Bing Bong could overcome that, Bing Bong's own sadness.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in his sacrifice, it was such a poignant moment because it was intentionally on his part unsung.
That's right.
She did not even know he sacrificed himself until she was where she needed to be.
Yep.
And that just his, telling her to, yell louder because he knew his voice wasn't going to be able to be a part of what propelled them. So he tells her to yell louder, and you at first think he's saying that just to get momentum, and you realize, no, he's saying that because he's taking himself out for Riley's benefit. So,
Bing bong, Gabe.
I mean, it sounds like the gospel to me.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, honestly, like to restore joy,
Yeah.
there had to be a sacrifice.
Yeah.
I know Pixar didn't mean to include Jesus in the middle of this movie, but he's there in this oddly shaped elephant, dog,
Dolphin,
whatever,
yeah,
whatever he
that.
is.
Yeah.
And it really is like it's
Yeah.
my girls were crying. Like even the second time we watched it last week, like they're crying, and I may have got misty. I don't know. I can't remember. But
So
but
good.
it's such a great. It is a great picture of what friendship should look like, right? And at the end of the day, I love what you just said about like him doing whatever it took, right, for joy in order to be restored, for the good, essentially, of Riley, even though she had to lose something. But Imagination Island or Imagination
Land,
whatever it
called
was,
Yeah.
that was wild.
That was crazy. Okay, last thing I want to talk about with this, and you guys can add anything else you want, but just the importance of friends in her life. And this is going to be far more important in Inside Out 2. But from the very beginning, one of the things that I noticed is friends were her primary like identifier. It was very, very important to her. And this is something that we had done last summer. We had read a book, not a Christian book, right? Hold On to Your Kids. And it talked about, and the line from the book is, kids don't need friends, kids need parents. And I think, just understand, that's a very, weighted term and statement. But this movie overemphasizes the importance of friends and underemphasizes the importance of parents, right? Her parents do not parent her and give her direction, principles, guidance, speak truth to her, right? Her friends really are super important, and you'll see this carried into the second movie, right, where identifying with her friends is the most important thing. And I think from a parenting perspective, that is a very dangerous place to be, right? That our kids are far more influenced by their friends and their peers than they are by their parents. So from a parenting perspective, we're doing a parent podcast, right? Parents, I think this is one of the things we need to understand is our role in raising and shaping our kids is way more important and vital than who their friends are, right? That we need to help shape them into the image of God's children, right? And make sure that you're looking at who else is influencing them, right? Social media. That's the one thing this movie doesn't tap into a little, right? It really doesn't. She has a cell phone, but she doesn't really have social media. In the second one, they'll introduce social media just real quickly and then run away from it, which I thought was interesting that they didn't focus on that. Because as a young girl in this culture, 13 years old, she doesn't
It was almost a big miss.
Right. It was like she doesn't have any social media? You got to be kidding, right? And especially if we're going to introduce anxiety and not introduce a cell phone. So they did not go down that path. But I just think, what do you guys think about the influence of friends in her life?
Well, if we're going back to the scene where she makes the choice to run away from home, right? She's trying to get back to this place where she was happy. And it seemed like she was happy because that's where her friends were.
Yeah.
And that's where her hockey team was. And, right, she's trying to get back to this group of people that make her, feel the good emotions that she wants to feel. So, there's that, like, when we see this, that's a good place to have a conversation with a kid. Why do you think that she did that? Is that something that you would ever do? Why was it that she was willing to separate from her parents and instead choose her friends, and that the relationship with the parents wasn't strong enough that faced with those two choices, you would get on a bus and go across the country, right, at 11 years old?
Yeah.
I believe that my relationship with my 11-year-old is much stronger than that. And there wouldn't be a moment in his mind where he thinks, even in my sadness, even in my fear, even in whatever emotions I'm feeling, the choice for me is to go to my friends rather than to my mom and my dad first. It's like, where were the parents?
Yeah.
The parents were very kind of focused on their own business, right?
And
Dad's
honestly,
going to work.
Being Riley's friend, right? That was the thing is, they weren't necessarily her parents as much as they were just older friends. Especially, and I'll just say this, the dad figure, right? His relationship with Riley was very friend-based, right?
Play.
Right. A lot of gameplay, and which is fine, but there's just so much more as far as the role of what the dad offers, right, to their children than just being the funny guy. And I think that's the one thing is as she pulled away from her parents, right, I just think there wasn't the stability there where, my role as the child is defined by who my parents are. Right, and I need to respect that. I mean, there wasn't any of that. Now, I don't expect Disney and Pixar to necessarily do that, but from my perspective, I think that's a very important thing to make sure that my job isn't to be my kid's friend; it's to be their parents.
I think at some point too, as parents, we know that there is a time where we need to release our kids and let them go and become their own independent people and launch them. I'm not sure if 11 is the right time for our kids to be
Seems
so
a little early.
independent that they're like, I can think through this problem, I can get on a bus, I can get myself to Minnesota, I can, live with my friends and all is happy.
And I think even 5, 8, 10 years ago, that would have just been like a piece of cartoon fluff. Like, of course, she's a cartoon, she can do that. But now, with kids having cell phones and, they have Uber on their cell phone. I mean, they have a lot more freedom and a lot more ways to get places than they ever have before. So, yeah, it is but you would hope that there is groundwork laid that that the child goes to the parent with their issues and not goes back to recreate. I mean, it is, an immature thought that she can just go back and live the life she had without parents. It's quite a jump. But also, I do think that there is more ability now to do something like that than there ever has been for kids who can't drive.
Yeah. I thought I thought it was interesting. You said something earlier about the parents almost like needing that validation from Riley to be this happy girl. It's almost like they needed it to help validate the choices they were making, these family choices that they were making, almost in terms of they were finding their identity and how their kid responded to their choices, as opposed to being like the responsible ones who are actually training and teaching through those emotions. And so when you mentioned like this dad figure that they introduce, his default was to always, when things got difficult, was to be the goofball, right? Was to stir up and like stroke the goofball side of her. And so when she's sad, what does he do? He becomes a monkey, right? And all of a sudden it's supposed to fix everything in Riley's life is just to remember that I'm a big goofball and not actually process through these emotions. Right. So I think that's where, from a parenting standpoint, like just the recognition of, man, instead of doing the easy thing, as a dad, like my job should be to step into her emotions, his emotions, whatever my child is going through, and to help walk them through those processes of dealing with those emotions, not just running and trying to mask over it or gloss over it, and try to divert into something that they're not, because all of a sudden, well, then that makes my decision on whatever I've determined for our family to be best okay.
Yeah.
I think you can see that too, that when you, as a parent, dig into those harder things, your relationship with your children strengthens. And so the visual of this that is in the movie is they take one of these core memories, this this beautiful golden, which means happy core memory, and it's Riley celebrating with her family and her hockey team. Let's scroll back 5 minutes from that, and you see that joyful moment was not born out of joy, but it was born out of sadness. It was born out of loss and disappointment, right? She had missed the winning goal and was sad. And when her parents stepped into that sadness with her and comforted her, and her friends came in and, celebrated her despite this loss, it turned into this beautiful core memory that she had, but was not based in happiness initially.
Yeah.
And then you also see this when Riley gets back from the bus, her parents, for the first time I think we see in this movie, sit with her in her sadness and validate that feeling and share with her that they also are feeling that. And what happens to Family Island? It is recreated in this more beautiful way because now their bond is so much deeper than just this superficial, we can always be great when things are happy.
Yeah.
Right.
But now we can also be great when there's sadness too.
And from a biblical perspective, right? That's why Deuteronomy 6 talks about, right, this training, right, is a daily walking with your child, right? Daily working through. Proverbs 22, right, talks about training up a child in the way they should go. So I think that's a really important, concept is, the movie doesn't give us, a lot of parenting training, right? But there's a couple little insights where you go, that's where they're parenting, right? It isn't just, being fun with your kids or finding the happy moment, but it really is training your children and introducing truth to them, helping them understand situations beyond their own maturity.
Yeah.
Well, and just like you said, when the dad, pretends to be a monkey or, and when he makes light of the situation, he's really telling Riley, I can't deal with you. Do not bring me serious stuff because I can't handle it. And that, I think, is a lesson for parents. When he reverts to those responses, that tells her, I can't bring things to Dad.
That's right.
I can't take this serious thing that I'm feeling to my dad. He cannot handle it.
Yeah.
Versus, like you said, when she gets off the bus and then they have a conversation and then things are different and they express and so there is a difference there. But I think a lot of times, parents might want to just keep things surface and they think that's a service and it's not.
Yeah.
It's really messaging to your kids that you can't handle their big stuff, and that's the last message we want to give them.
Because then where do they go?
Yeah.
Then they go to their friends or they run away from it. And
Right.
Yeah, very good. Well, there you go. Inside Out, the first movie. Very profound, deep stuff going on in here. The second movie is going to introduce a whole new set of emotions, right, as she enters puberty, and that control board is going to explode. And I guess, Jane, you're the only one without a kid who's really gone through this huge change of emotions. In fact, it's kind of interesting. We had on a guy who was telling me that from birth to 2 years old is the most change that your body physically will ever go through. But then puberty is the second most, right? And it's a very interesting time. And so this is kind of a fun movie for us to kind of dive into from a parenting perspective and see what Pixar and Disney are going to do with puberty and Riley, right, becoming a teenager. So let's talk about the second one when we get back.
Okay.
Thank you for investing the time to listen to this episode of The Journey. Please take a minute to share with friends and family who will also benefit from this valuable resource. And don't forget to rate and review this podcast on your favorite podcast app. It is truly our blessing and honor to walk with you on The Journey.